case instituted by the Nigerian police against the End Bad Governance protesters, majorly minors, who were arraigned on November 1st on alleged treason, resumes at the Federal High Court, Abuja. This time, however, the Attorney General of the Federation, through his counsel, is here to take over the case and discontinue it. The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation is attending the proceeding alongside other lawyers. At the resumed hearing, a representative of the Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Mohammed Abubakar, says he has applied to take over and discontinue the case. This development comes just hours after President Bola Tinubu directed the AGF and law enforcement agencies to release all the minors detained over the protests. Counsel to the first to 50th defendants, Mr. Femi Falana, did not oppose the application. Mr. Falana says that it was in accordance with the letter and spirit of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, as well as several provisions of the Child Rights Act, stating that the AGF has the power to take over the case at any stage and exercises discretion to discontinue the suit. The trial judge, Justice Obiara Egwatu, subsequently struck out the case. Counsel to the defendants applaud the release by the federal government, but calls for the release of other protesters in related cases.
Yesterday, 19 people were also charged in Borno State, including minors. Again, we are calling on the government to discontinue all cases pending in different states with respect to the August protests.
The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation has a mandate from President Tinubu to cater for the welfare of the minors.
Before we return them, we want to do also due process of ensuring that they are medically fit. So we take them for safekeeping in the facility and make sure they're medically checked. And where we need to make additional treatment, we take care of them so that psychologically they're also tested and we ensure that they're safely and well treated and taken care of and giving human face to what happened.
The release of the minors now puts to rest the case against them as they reunite with their families after being in detention for about 2 months. Emanuela Ekele, Channels Television News.
And welcome back. Now that matter, when it broke, it was I don't know. What tell me? Anyway.
What don't you know? It's a story. Let's be honest here. It was a story that made us feel a little embarrassed and actually showed all the loopholes that were not covered, all the fault lines. We've had that conversation about those fault lines, and all of that has led to where we are today. And our guest, Mr. Rafsanjani, is joining us this morning, to have a conversation about it because of where we are in this conversation about these young men. Thank you so much, Mr. Rafsanjani, for being with us on the program. Let's talk a bit about the situation as is now. Is it a little too late? Is it too little too late right now? These attempts by the administration to repair the situation. And there still are many people who do not agree with this decision. There are some people that believe that, look, if a law was broken, they should still face the wrath of the law. Where are you thinking, as a human rights person on this matter?
Thank you very much. I think, first and foremost, those who were involved in this, what I call the greatest embarrassment to President Tinubu and the Nigerian government, surely they must be held responsible for the embarrassment they have caused the nation. And it is purely because of circumstances and because some people just want to please, some people. That is why they carry out this, barbaric action. We're happy that even the president acknowledged actually the fact that there will be investigation against those individuals that have perpetrated this act of inhuman action against not only the minors, but even the other, protesters who were probably not even part of any violence or any vandalization, because report has it that so many people that were even killed were not even actually involved in any, violence protests. There were a number of Nigerians that were equally killed by the same overzealous people. That has also been documented by a lot of organizations, and I believe that even the government itself must have record of how some of its officials have killed innocent Nigerians who were actually participating in this protest. But I think in all of it is the lack of humanity that has demonstrated, a lack of competency, in handling issues. And of course, the failure of governance in Nigeria, because ideally, there has been some kind of notice that there was going to be protests because people were actually tired of insecurity. People were actually tired, or rather, they are still tired of hunger, corruption, corrupt people, corrupting the whole, nation and moving freely without nobody harassing them. A lot of Nigerians are not happy, and because it's embarrassment to the nation. So what I expected government to do was to genuinely and sincerely do something that will show to Nigerians that government is actually indeed working and intended to do something. They didn't, do that. In fact, the whole thing was made like a business, for some people to just make money. In fact, some people really wanted that protest to happen so that they can justify spending so many, so much money. You remember there were so many, meetings, so many people were called engagement. All those engagements were not really engagement that they should have done at that time. That's what we call prevention. If government had taken steps to prevent so many things that, will have led to this, we would not be where we are. But again, what we have also seen in this, action is to show you that some people are not doing their work with professionalism, with the courtesy, with the decency and responsibility, but rather they just want to do sycophancy to prove to the, whoever their boss is, that they are actually working. Otherwise, you their own sense, how will you arrest a child of 12, 13, 14 years old?
Mr. Rafsanjani, you remember when that protest happened in parts of northern Nigeria? We did see young people who looked a lot like the people that we saw in court. I'm not saying it was them exactly, but we saw a lot of young people who looked underage as well, running away with generators. You remember those videos?
Yeah.
They climbed a police AP, what's that police car called? APC. They climbed it. They were driving it around, right? We saw them vandalizing people's businesses. We saw people crying that their businesses were being vandalized by people who look a lot like the people that we saw in this court. Now, while we're talking about the protection of human rights, let's talk a bit about how these protests metastasize in many. This is the second time we're seeing that. The first one was with NSAS, where while we had genuine protesters who were asking for a change in their life and asking for better governance, there's always this splinter that would always go and start to vandalize and take people's things and commit crimes and whatnot. We saw that with NSAS. We're seeing it, we saw it again with the End Bad Governance protest. How should law enforcement, because I think what's happening in many cases is that a lot of it is like use it for, they say to the person who's wielding a hammer, everything is a nail. How should they be handling these sorts of situations so that we do not have breakdown of law and order, but people also have the right to express themselves, asking for better livelihoods?
So just to give you answer to this is that is where we have law enforcement officers. That is where we have due process. That is why you do not take law into your hands. Now, if nobody is defending anybody who vandalize or who destroy any thing. Nobody is defending such kind of person, But the issue is that you as a law enforcement officer, you cannot behave like the same person that you are actually, accusing or trying. you as a professional, as somebody with the necessary training, you're supposed to handle things, in a manner that, it will not suggest that you are also doing barbaric thing, okay? So that is where the fault line comes, When you arrest these people, interrogate them, interview them, establish that they were actually people that, involved in this. Because from the reports that a lot of people and witnesses that they gave, some of the people that were even shot, that were killed, some of the people that were arrested, were not even part and parcel of anything. So where must you gather everybody, bundle everybody, and keep them, even against our own law? The law in Nigeria is very clear. You cannot keep, underage in the same facilities that you have kept adults, hardened criminals. What are you trying to teach, So that is that one. So, number two, this crime did not happen in Abuja. Why must you bring these children from Kaduna, Zaria, Kano to Abuja? So I think there are a lot of faulty lines, and that is why, because you are a professional, you are a serious trained officer, you're supposed to not be the same with the people that you are actually accusing.
All right, Mr. Rafsanjani, we'll just step to our Lagos studio where we have a human rights lawyer and former national president of the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, Mr. Malachy joining us from our Lagos studio. Mr. Gumadu, thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Good morning, Neta and Kela. Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay, if you can hear me, let's just go in real quick here. Mr. Rafsanjani has talked about some of the things that have transpired over the last few days. I mean, those underage suspects, rather, now it's clear that there are children being arraigned in a court based on the laws and against the laws of the land. That they've been kept in custody for over 3 months, and then they're being arraigned in court when they should have been in juvenile detention. What's your take in all of this? Let's start from that point.
The ramification of this misadventure is multifaceted. There are so many wrong aspects to this ugly development that has cast us in a very bad light, even before the international community. So let's look at it this way. The first is that the government of Nigeria has no right whatsoever to keep citizens, no less innocent juvenile children, in detention facilities for over 3 months. No such right. In short, the Constitution insists that where that happens, they are not just entitled to apology, they ought to be given compensation. And I think that this can be pursued to a logical conclusion, just so that the government of Nigeria does not run away or get out of this situation thinking that they can perfunctorily deal with this matter and sweep it under the carpet. That is the one. The second is that we are, as a nation, we have subscribed and ratified so many international conventions, from the United Nations Charter on Human Rights to the Convention Against Torture, to the minimum standard of treatment of prisoners, as well as domestic laws. And I'm referencing the Child Rights Act, I reference the Universal Basic Education Act, as well as the ground norm, which is the Constitution, all declaring their abhorrence to what has just happened. So, if you situate this matter properly within the context of what has just played out, I believe that the federal government of Nigeria became completely overwhelmed, not just by the outcry within the municipal state of Nigeria, but the outrage, rightly expressed by the international community. And, it blows no one any good wind at all that in this time on age, where the children under 18 years, under the Child Rights Act, are supposed to be in schools, where they are never allowed to be tortured or taken into custody with hardened criminals, as my colleague have said over there, or where, as it were, the government has just, lumped in every person in this situation and preferred charges that are unfounded. Look, let me tell you something. We are at the level of the Citizens' Liberties Committee of the Nigerian Bar Association, to which I remain the alternate chair. We have intervened in this matter in a very strategic manner, spanning.
Okay, Mr. Kumalo, if I may interrupt you briefly here before you get into that, you've made you mentioned something here, 2 words in fact, unfounded charges. Of course, you do know that there are some people in the Nigerian space who are also concerned about having committed a crime. Those who have committed a crime ought to do the time. So, but now you're saying unfounded charges. At what point do we balance this? Well, they are children, they are underage, and by the laws, they are minors until they are 18. So at what point do we balance this situation where you've done the crime, do the time?
You are able to balance it. That your delicate balancing that you seek can come when you are able to establish what we call a prima facie case. In law, you don't just rush to court. If you rush to court, you rush out. There is what we call a prima facie case. That is within the parameters of common reasoning. Can you rightly indicate that these persons who have been arrested may have committed the offense and allegations against them? If you're able to do that within the parameters of the rules guiding the establishment of a prima facie case, then you can proceed. But where, as in this case, you are talking of treasonable felony. Please, treasonable felony. That is about the highest form of crime against the state. And to establish that is that the punishment is death penalty. So, please, tell me, even without being a lawyer or a prosecutor, what is it that the state has beyond the flag they complain about, beyond the fact that children were running amok on the street, expressing their dissatisfaction with the state, expressing their pains and frustration and hunger? What is it? Look, I think the government had just simply embarrassed himself. It needn't take this long before those children were released unconditionally. In fact, I can tell you that but for the campaign and advocacy mounted strenuously by some of us, without sounding immodest, nothing would have happened. You can imagine 3 months of children in detention. Look at the way they looked. Just watch them on the television and see the dehydration and the malnutrition and, all that has happened to them as a people. And then just oppose that with the flimsy reasons. Okay, even from the standpoint of the discordant voice from the government, the prosecutor, who is supposed to know all in relation to the evidence, a body of evidence that he has, talks about a very matured adult who have married, many of them with multiple wives, and that the same time, and almost in the same breath, the government of Nigeria, through the Minister of Information, had come out to say no, that these are minors, and that the president had directed A, B, and C. In short, it was at that point that the Attorney General activated his right under Section 174. He need not the intervention of the president to do that. In any case, even the president himself came too late, too little. And that is why we must, as a country, take advantage of this concrete situation to demand what the Constitution doesn't say, just release them and they're so uniform for them, very light uniform, and then tell them to go to jail. No. The apology must be tendered to them, documented, so that Nigeria will see this stage and curve and turn, and take advantage of this particular situation to guide its future behaviors in a way that shows resentment and that we are not ready to continue with this kind of habit. Besides that written apology, there must be compensation duly extended to these children and their families. And these children should not just be integrated into the society. We must therefore activate the provisions of Section 11, Section 13, 14, and 15 in particular of the Child Rights Act. What about the Universal Basic Education Act? And send these children to school. Monitor and ensure that these ones, in addition to the over 14 or 15 million Nigerian children who are out of school, get back to school and will begin to deal with this situation seriously. That's my position. That is the delicate balance you want to hear. There was no previous case.
Mr. Malachy, Ogunmadu, we'll get back to you and of course, Mr. Rafsanjani in a bit, but just so we can update our viewers on some breaking news right now. The spokesperson of the president, the special advisor to the president on information and strategy, Mr. Bayo Onanuga, has just sent a statement right now announcing the passing of Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Taoreed Abiodun Lagbaja. We're seeing that statement coming right now from the State House. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, regretting to announce the passing of Lieutenant General Taoreed Abiodun Lagbaja, the Chief of Army Staff, at the age of 56. He was born on February the 28th in 1968. He was appointed Chief of Army Staff on June the 19th in 2003 by President Tinubu. His distinguished military career began when he enrolled in the Nigerian Defense Academy in 1987. On September the 19th, 1992, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Nigerian Infantry Corps as a member of the 39th Regular Corps. Throughout his service, Lieutenant General Lagbaja demonstrated exceptional leadership and commitment, serving as a platoon commander in the 93 Battalion and the 72 Special Forces Battalion, played pivotal roles in numerous internal security operations, including Operation Zaki in Benue State, Lafia Dole in Borno, Udoka in southeast Nigeria, and Operation Forest Sanity across Kaduna and Niger State. An alumnus of the prestigious U.S. Army War College, he earned a master's degree in strategic studies, demonstrating his dedication to professional growth and excellence in military leadership. He's survived by his beloved wife, Maria, and their 2 children. President Tinubu is expressing his heartfelt condolences to the family and the Nigerian Armed Forces during this difficult time. He wishes Lieutenant General Lagbaja eternal peace and honors his significant contributions to the nation. He was a wonderful man. I have worked with him covering that beat, and he will be missed. And our condolences also added to that of the president, to the Nigerian Army, and to everyone in the defense forces right now who are mourning the death of Lieutenant General Taoreed Lagbaja, the Chief of Army Staff. And may his soul rest in peace. Back to our conversation this morning. We've heard a lot of the things that Mr. Malachy Ogunmadu was talking about, and I want to be able to get him to respond to something that we heard Mr. Rafsanjani talk about. When it comes to law enforcement and how they handle these sorts of situations, he did say that there's a lot of high-handedness and what he referred to as eye service, Mr. Ogunmadu. Do you think that we have a situation where people feel the need to show that they're working, and as a result of that, commit a lot of mistakes, as a lot of the mistakes you have noted were committed in this particular situation with these children who were arrested and arraigned?
Sister, it is for that reason that we are pushing for serious investigation into this matter. It's one step to recognize that there's a serious transgression on the part of the government and the prosecution team, but it is by far more important moving forward to now deal with the situation in a way that clearly shows that we're not interested in traveling this route any further. And what does that entail? It entails that people had exercised serious indiscretion. There have been misapplication of the law. There have even, by far more, the abuse of power. And if you don't mind, total disregard for the rule of law in this circumstance. What you do is to take steps, practical ones at that, to show that the state resents such behavior. And there's no other way to deal with it other than to call out people who were involved in this whole embarrassment, starting from the law enforcement agencies. And we're not talking of just the law enforcement officers that effected the arrest or brutalized the children, those who punished them while in detention, because we have records of that coming into our centers. It has also got to do with those who gave the directives. Because, as it were, these chaps don't just act. You could have very overzealous ones among them who go overboard in trying to impress it on their respective bosses that they are doing their bidding. But those who gave the directives or failed to stop this international embarrassment should be brought to book one way or the other, or at least shown the way, to appreciate that this is not the way that a civilized nation can. Look, the fundamental rights of Nigerians to freely express themselves is guaranteed. It's not just a constitutional right. It is a fundamental right. It is fundamental because it is entrenched and has become inalienable. The technical meaning of that is that you can't just take it away perfunctorily in the way and manner that we do and then say, oh, God, release them. No, it doesn't end there. In fact, I am proposing that the children, their family, even civil society organizations, NGOs, as permissible by the law now, under the Fundamental Right Enforcement Procedure rules, can take up these matters and seek serious compensation on behalf of these children. And I'm very certain that the courts will be willing to make example out of this one. So you could see that if you have yourself cited or located along the line of this ugly development, you have questions to answer. And as a nation that have risen from the ashes of military rule, that passed through the difficult period of military, hegemony in this country, we cannot afford, maybe because people never suffered. I did. I had my degrees withheld on account of this madness. We fought during the June 12th. We were detained. So many things. So when you talk about it, the way it resonates in some of us is not exactly the way I see it. It is not just as simple as the president had directed. The president will move further to now seek recompense. These people must be compensated, and if they don't, the laws are there to be activated to get damages as much as possible from this government. That is the way to go.
I mean, speaking of compensations, I mean, that's not the only topic that we've been hearing, especially when it comes to courts in Nigeria. I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Malachy, in a bit. But I want to be able to talk with Mr. Rafsanjani a little bit about the appeal court in Abuja, and that ruling that we saw reversing the ex-CJN's CCT Code of Conduct Tribunal conviction for asset declaration breaches. Now, this particular, it's coming as some kind of arrangement has been reached between Onogen and the federal government. But we remember what it was like in 2019. This man did not declare his assets, And then, of course, there were a lot of people who said that the case in itself was politically motivated. And this man has been pushing for this since then. Some kind of settlement has been reached right now. We don't know if he's going to sue for compensation, but we do know that the 10-year ban on him holding public office has been reversed. And his accounts have been unfrozen. He's allowed to live his life again. But talk to us a little bit about the ramifications of that. And one of the things that he said back then, and I'll never forget it, was that this was painting the judiciary in a very bad light, because it was coming at a time when judges were being raided and all of this was happening, that the trust that the Nigerian people were having in the judiciary was being eroded by the government at the time. Let's talk a bit about that dynamic and where we are now with Onogen's case.
Thank you very much. I think one of the incredible damage that political elite have done in this country is to rubbish judiciary, is to make judiciary a commercial institution that if you have money, you can, purchase, judgment, you can just do whatever you want. And that really clearly undermines the confidence that Nigerians and even international community, has in our administrative justice system. This is something that we cannot continue to allow it to happen. A situation whereby some people will go and procure judgment just because they think they have money or they have power. They must compel, something to happen without due process. I think is really one of the greatest damage that is happening to our administrative justice system. If you do not deal with the judicial corruption, it is going to be difficult to actually achieve even the peace that we are all, admiring to have. A situation whereby somebody did not win election will rig the election and tell you we'll meet in court. And because allegedly they have, did what they want to do with the judiciary, then the judiciary will now be the one to be announcing the winner of the election. We have to stop that. And that is why we are calling on Mr. President to do two things. One, ensure that you set up a proper, judicial sector reforms. Because if the corruption and the laziness and the lousiness and the, all sort of, negative thing that is embedded in our judicial system, if it remains, definitely it will not be good for our country and for our democracy. So we need to have a proper judicial reform in the country. In the past, there are some, we have had judges that nobody can approach them, to go and procure judgment because of the integrity they have, because of the fact that they are not those people that you can try and, bribe, Today, the thing is like a market. That's a sad story. Since a rigger will tell you that let's meet in court, he knows that he rigged the election, or she knows that she rigged the election. And because she knows that she has already planted some people, in fact, the allegation now is that most of the judicial officers are planted by many politicians. So that, in the event they have issue, they will get favorable, judgment. You see the whole allegation that is even going on Wiki now, it's all part of this. And we must not, as a nation, allow that kind of thing to be happening. The second reforms that Mr. President must do is still on criminal administrative justice system. The police in particular, we need to reform, we need to further do reform in the police system. Police should not be enemy and should not be, antagonized. Do you know how many number of police we are losing in this country almost every week or every day? They are killing them and nobody is even knowing. And unfortunately, Nigerians are not even sympathizing with them because of the misconduct of some of them. We cannot allow our policemen to be killed like ants. And when they kill them, to even get their family to have their compensation is a problem. Go and check, go and see what is going on. Because also the recruitment process needs to be addressed. You cannot go and be recruiting crooks and criminals that you cannot validate their own behavior. And then you expect to have a better people that will come and do better things. So we need to do something about recruitment process. You cannot go and be selling, or giving bribe to buy recruitment forms and then pay bribe, to get, recruited, pay bribe to be posted to what they call lucrative places, pay bribe to get your promotion. How do you expect police to work?
Mr. Rafsanjani, you're painting a picture of a reform of the entire country.
We have to reform these two aspects: the police, or rather the security sector, and the judiciary. Because if these are not, done professionally, responsibly, the citizens will lose hope and confidence. you know, and then the international community and even international investors will not come and do any investment here.
Let's get to Mr. Ugumadu. Mr. Ugumadu, you were the one that put out that word about compensation. So let's start off from that point of compensation. Former CJN Onogen, now discharged and acquitted. But I remember, if I do remember correctly, at that time when that case came up, according to the code of conduct, he actually did not have a case to answer. That was the argument in some quarters. And as Kayla also mentioned, there was that news that this whole thing is being orchestrated by the political class. So now the courts have discharged and acquitted him. Whether it's based on a settlement out of court or whatever, everything is now like put aside. Is that where we should be? Is that how it should have gone, going back in history to where it all started from?
I think the starting point is to say that it is regrettable that whoever found ourselves in that situation where the Chief Justice of the country was put in the dock. The hunter became the hunted, and that was regrettable as a practitioner of law. The second point is to say that there are options out there for the former Chief Justice of Nigeria, and he knows the law. There's what we call malicious prosecution. If you have been maliciously prosecuted, or in their own word, persecuted, that activates your right to challenge what has happened. That is the one. The other is to stick to what I have said, to say, well, this couldn't have just happened. And I think I listened to his counsel, Awumolo, SAN, you know, on your station, when he said, what do you make of a man who rose from the basics as a junior lawyer called to bar, became the Chief Justice of Nigeria, and rubbished the way he is rubbished? I make the point that if he feels strongly about what has happened to him, that is why we have the rule of law. Once there is a wrong, there must be a remedy. We say, ubi jus, ubi remedium. Once there is a wrong, there must be a remedy. And the more of these actions that are taken, the more we deepen the jurisprudence of law in our country, the more we aim at the certainty of the law and go beyond prevarications to dealing with these things and these matters in a very settled manner, so that whoever suffers the same kind of transgression in the future could have a precedent. And that's how we develop the law. So it is not sufficient to just stop at settlement. Settlement is fine. But in many ways, it is also another form of compromise. If you say settlement, you mean parties have come to shift grounds and agree on a peaceful, amicable way out of court. So, but there must be, except of course, like my Lord Justice Onego would know himself, that the terms of settlement now executed and entered as a consent judgment also has integrated into it a clause precluding him from, you know, taking further actions in respect of that matter. If he signed up to that, well, he has tied his hand, you know. Otherwise, yes, otherwise, and that is where some of us, otherwise, this is the time to, because he has suffered everything. Again,
seek proper compensation. I mean, Mr. Malachy, that actually brings me to my next question, which has to do with what sort of settlement is this? It's not a plea deal. You know, it's not a plea deal. This does seem like the kind of settlement that comes in civil cases. At least that's how it looks. It's not some kind of plea deal. And I think a lot of legal pundits will have a lot of conversations around this. But just to get your thoughts on this sort of settlement in this sort of matter, you know, are there things that we don't understand about what this settlement actually means, and does it apply in this case?
This question is not lost on me, and I think you have probably dealt with a lot of legal matters to ask this kind of questions. Yes, settlements are easily contrived within civil trials, you know. There's what we call compoundment of crime. And if you're not very careful, you come close to that when you're trying to settle in criminal matters. Yeah? So it is not as easy as you do have, you know, within civil trials and within civil cases. However, the criminal justice system in Nigeria, as applicable in other jurisdictions, has developed so much so that we now have windows of ADR, so to speak, generally. You have plea bargain, like you mentioned. You have these settlements. You have people going into one form of understanding with the state. First, to avoid the huge costs of prosecution. Secondly, to save the time of the court, the precious time of the court in pursuing such matters that could otherwise be settled out of court. And thirdly, in a way that attracts faster recoveries in cases of stolen assets and so on and so forth. In other words, our laws, the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, recognizes some of these developments and mechanisms to deal with cases that are otherwise, otherwise that can be handled in an amicable manner between parties. But I think the point you seek to make is that, so what then happens if you have situations in which criminal allegations were leveled against not just any other person, but the former Chief Justice of Nigeria? And if you recall, part of the drawback of that case was that it was pushed. There was a pushback. It was advocated that you don't just pick a judicial officer and straight into the conventional courts, whether the High Court, Federal High Court, or even the CCT, without first exhausting the internal mechanisms of dealing with the same matter before the National Judicial Council. And that was about the first problematic hurdle that case suffered. The rest is history now. But I think that, you really don't know how you will end until you have dealt with all the vicissitudes of life. Now that the former Chief Justice of Nigeria have found himself in this situation, it would be nice if he looks at the terms of settlement that he has executed. I'm sure he will be interested in just licking his wounds and allowing the whole thing, leaving the whole thing for God, as we do most often than not in this part of the world. But for the sake of future.
Mr. Gumadu, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it at this point. So I want to thank you so much for coming in, Mr. Gumadu. Malachy Gumadu is a human rights lawyer, a former president of the Society for the Defense of Human Rights. Thank you, former national president. Thank you for coming in this morning. Also here in our Abuja studio, we had Awal Musa Rafsanjani, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center. Thank you for coming in this morning. We're going to ask you how it was when you went to monitor the elections in the US, but we'll take that up another time. Again, thank you for coming.
Okay, I just come back this morning, and just honor this invitation.
Thank you, thank you. But we'll get you in to come and talk about the election. Right. At this point, we would take a break, and when we'll come back, we'll be stepping into the Business Morning on Sunrise Daily Studios. Don't go away.